Welcome to Artist Worship. Each week we feature stories of artists and explore their process of creation. I'm your host, Vanessa Lowry, and I'm thankful that you're joining me. On this show, I talk with artists of various faiths, working in a wide range of mediums, on the common theme of how they use inspiration and creativity as an expression of their spirituality. Learn how their art is an expression of their own connection to however they name God, Jehovah, Allah, Source, the universe, the great mystery, or something else. My hope is that these stories will inspire your creative efforts and your own spiritual expression. My guest today is Mike Redgrave, who is the owner of Moon Bonsai in Marietta, Georgia, and he's been doing this for the last 24 years. In that time, he has become one of the premier next-generation bonsai artists in the South and has become known for high-quality traditional Japanese bonsai. His bonsai art has appeared at corporate events, art galleries, and in major motion pictures and commercials. Mike has been a strong advocate for the fascinating art of bonsai through teaching and sharing the spirit of bonsai with tens of thousands of people. He enjoys teaching about bonsai at garden centers, garden clubs, and with his own students, as well as writing articles on bonsai for his website and other publications. He's a regular on the art festival circuit in the Southeast, as well as the flower show circuit and bonsai events. Through his work with the Atlanta Bonsai Society, Michael has become the main sponsor of the Japan Fest exhibit. It has become one of the most successful bonsai fundraisers in the Southeast. Welcome, Mike. Thank you for being here today.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.
So how did you get interested in the art of bonsai?
I'd love to say that I grew up in Japan and a great master taught me, but actually pretty simple story. I bought one years ago and did pretty well with it, and I saw a gentleman selling them at Christmas time, and I said, oh, this is something you could really get into. And it's you like the outdoors and you like working with plants and trees, and so that's how I got started.
So how long do you have to work with bonsai before you really are accomplished enough to then turn around and sell bonsai plants?
I think it takes about 10 years to really understand all the subtleties of bonsai. It's a very intricate art form, and there are a lot of subtleties to it that take a while to understand. And also the culture is very different that bonsai comes from in Japan than what we can understand in the United States. So it takes a while to understand it.
So in the 24 years that you've been doing bonsai, how have you seen a shift in the way people look at the art or are interested in the art? What has changed in the U.S. in that regard?
It's changed a lot, not just in the U.S., but internationally, and it's become a very international art form. For instance, in Italy right now, it's all the rage, and it's become very popular in different places in Europe and South America. And I think the United States has fallen a little bit behind in bonsai because we have import restrictions here, the USDA import restrictions, which are pretty severe, where Europe, they don't have those restrictions. So a lot of the good bonsai are actually going to Europe right now. But the United States is still a very vibrant center for bonsai, and there are clubs all through the United States that support bonsai. And right here in Atlanta, we have the Atlanta Bonsai Society, which is we're a member of and is a very strong supporter of the education of bonsai in the Atlanta area.
So when someone purchases a bonsai plant, it's a living thing, so there's obviously things they need to do to take care of it. It's not like purchasing a painting or purchasing a sculpture or a piece of pottery. So how do you teach your customers what they need to do?
Well, first I tell them it's a little bit like having a pet. And so people say, well, I can't keep anything alive. I can't keep a plant alive. I say, well, do you have a dog or a cat? Have you killed them yet? No. And so it's a little bit like having a pet with a little tender loving care. It goes a long way. And we call bonsai the living art or the silent poem. So bonsai should tell a story about what the tree's been through and where it grew up and where it's been. So I tell my customers it's nothing difficult. There's no magic secret about growing bonsai. It's a lot like growing any other container plant, although you do have to be pretty dedicated to watering it every day in the summer.
So in addition to watering it, is there other things that someone has to do to maintain their artwork?
Of course, there's trimming and repotting and so forth. But basically, these plants, once they're in a container, they grow pretty slowly. And so it's not as much maintenance as people think it is.
So how does your spirituality find expression in your art of creating bonsai?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, it's an extremely spiritual art form and meditative art form to begin with. So when I began, or before I began in bonsai, I was really a type A personality and had type A type jobs and so forth. And 24 years later, I'm probably the complete opposite of that. And so I think it finds expression in the way we create the trees. There's no talking in bonsai. It's basically a silent meditative act. And the more you do it, the more you understand your place in the universe and your connection with nature. And hardly anything, I think, can bring you closer to nature and closer to the source than doing bonsai.
So when you're working on a piece, how long can you work on it at a time? Because I know it's a slow process of training this plant and getting it groomed exactly right. How long can you work on one piece before you then go to work on something else?
It's a slow process, and to get a really good show quality material, it can take up to 50 years to get a really good show quality bonsai. But when I'm working on a piece, if it's a fairly complex piece of material that's raw material to start with, and especially if I'm giving a demonstration, it can take 4 or 5 hours to really completely wire and pot and complete a piece. Other pieces that are smaller and what we call our commercial bonsai, which is the stuff that we sell in the garden centers and at the shows mostly, that can take 15, 20 minutes per piece.
So how is a bonsai defined? Is it by the size? Is it by the way that it's structured? How do you define that?
It's really defined by the size. So you have mame bonsai, which are the smallest or miniature bonsai. And then you have the standard size, and then you have large size bonsai. But it's really defined by different styles. So there's 12 basic styles which refer mainly to the angle of the planting of the tree. So you have cascade trees that look like a tree hanging off a cliff, off a mountainside, and you have informal upright trees which have some curve and movement to them, and you have slanting trees and so forth. So they're mainly defined by one of those 12 classic Japanese styles.
So where do you, what raw materials do you start with? Do you start with just any tree, or do you have to have a certain type of tree?
No, we kind of pride ourselves on sort of paving new ground and trying new plant materials that maybe have never been tried for bonsai. So you can use just about anything that has a small enough leaf that'll look to scale. So you probably wouldn't use a magnolia for material, but the amount of material is tremendous that you can use for bonsai. It's literally 300 to 400 different types of plant material are well suited for bonsai.
What kind of studio do you work in?
Unfortunately, right now, I work outdoors most of the time, and I have a very basic workbench that I work on, and it allows me to be right in the middle of the nursery, so I can go and choose material that I want to work on, and it's a very sort of free-form way of working, and I try and get done between 5 and 10 pieces a day, which, because it's a time-consuming art form, it can take quite a while just to do 10 pieces. So, but it's a very free-form way of working. When it gets too hot, I either jump in the pool or I go inside and work in the garage. But it's not a typical artist studio. I have my tools, and I'm surrounded by a whole nursery full of plants. So I feel very lucky that I have that amount of material to work with. Other artists, I can understand that it can be blocking and it can be a struggle to start from a blank canvas or to start from a piece of wood or piece of stone and then have an artistic vision for that. We're a little bit better off because we have plant material that we already know what to do with it. So,
well, and I would think that it's probably a little tricky with the extremes of weather that we sometimes have in Atlanta. I mean, usually our winters are not too bad, but, occasionally we have, like last year, we had a whole week that was, below zero and very, very cold. So I would think that would be a little bit challenge with your nursery and all of your work.
Well, plants are tougher than they seem. We primarily use hardy plant material that can stay outside year-round. We do get plant material from Florida every year, our tropical trees, and those are usually sold by the end of the year, so we don't have to overwinter them. But it's only when it gets down to 10 or 12 degrees that I really start to worry about a few things.
So do you do many commission pieces, or are most of your pieces that people just come by what you have to offer?
Most of our pieces are picked from our selection of plant material that we've prepared. Occasionally I'll get a special request for a certain size for a commercial or a certain type of tree for a wedding. Like we recently did a wedding ceremony downtown, and they had picked out two beautiful bonsai that were framed by the Atlanta skyline, and they had the wedding ceremony take place between the two bonsai. So that was interesting. Occasionally we do get special requests, but mainly people are happy just to get a good tree at a good price. So.
And so when if people wanted to come find your artwork, how would they find you? How would they come buy a bonsai from you?
Well, most people start by looking at our website, which is bonsaimoon.com. We're building a new website right now. It's under construction, but the old one, it has tons of information about the art form itself. It's very educational, and the new website will be even more so. You can also come to any of the festivals that we do. We'll be at Japan Fest September 14th and 15th. We'll be at the Candler Park Festival October 13th and 14th. And we just got into the Piedmont Park Art Festival, which we haven't done before, which is a big deal for us. So there's some of the art festival juries are a little reticent to let bonsai in to the art festivals because they don't understand it as a one of the standard accepted art forms that usually go in an art festival. So we'll be at the Piedmont Park Show, and that's the 18th or 19th of August. And, of course, you're always welcome to come to the nursery and look us up in Marietta and come make an appointment, come check us out. That's the best way to see what we have to offer.
So can you share a story of how creating this work of your art of bonsai, how that has expanded your awareness of God?
I think it's expanded my awareness in a lot of ways. I've been a seeker all my life, sort of on the path, and have explored various religions and various forms of meditation. For instance, I do Siddha yoga and Zen meditation, and I have, of course, a Catholic upbringing. And I think it has expanded my awareness. It's just the silence of doing meditative art form, I think, will bring you closer to yourself. And through an interaction with plant material, you gain, a greater understanding of yourself and thereby a greater understanding of God.
Well, and you said that it took a while for you, once you started on this road of learning bonsai and learning the art of bonsai, to then making it a full-time profession. How did you decide to turn that into what you were doing full-time?
Well, I think anybody that turns their hobby into a profession should think long and hard about it, because you can certainly ruin your hobby by trying to turn it into a business. And all of a sudden you have production quotas, and it becomes somewhat stressful to keep up with the business. So you run the risk of losing the enjoyment of the hobby by turning it into a business. So I thought about it, and, of course, one day you wake up and you have 200 trees in your backyard, and you say, oh, wow, I've got to start selling some of these, and it sort of gradually turns into a business. But I made the decision that it's something that I love to do, and if people are willing to buy them and support it, then I think it's one of the great businesses to get into, although you may starve the first 5 or 10 years trying to do it. But once you get established, it's a great business to be in because you get to work from home. You don't have to fight Atlanta traffic and go through that commute. You can, although you have to be very dedicated to working and set your hours accordingly, it's a very rewarding lifestyle.
Well, and I know anybody that owns a business, there's a lot of things that go into your business that don't have anything to do with the main core of what you're selling. So how much are you able to actually do your art versus how much time do you have to spend doing all the other things to make your business work? Right.
I'd love to say I get to do it all the time, but I don't. I tell people it's not easy because I have 5 jobs in one. So I have to be the sales manager, I have to be the nursery manager, I have to be the artist, of course, and I have to be the webmaster, and I have to be the public speaker that goes out and gives lessons and gives public demonstrations. So it's really like having 4 or 5 jobs in one. So if I only got to do bonsai all the time, it would be terrific. We'd be way ahead of the game. But, of course, there's a lot that goes into running a business. So.
And you do a lot of festivals. Do you enjoy that time at the festivals?
I love the festivals because it gives me a chance to interact with our customers and find out what they like and what they don't like and what they're interested in. And especially the children. I really love the children, seeing their reaction to the trees when they come in, because that's a really pure reaction to the art. And also love talking to the other artists at the festivals and see how they view their work and our work and basically our place in the world as artists.
So at what point did you start thinking of yourself as an artist?
I think it took a couple of years. I think, when you start dabbling in any kind of art form, you struggle at first to find your source and to find your inspiration for what you want to do. But I think after 5 or 6 years, especially after you start doing art festivals and the greater art community starts to accept you as an artist, then you can start thinking of yourself as an artist. But I think it takes a while to make that step. There's a great book that any artist should read if they're listening called The Artist Way. And it's really more than a book. It's a 12-step program on how to overcome the obstacles of becoming an artist.
I was just talking to a friend yesterday who we both are fans of The Artist Way, and I was saying to her it was such a game changer for me when I read that book, because it made me look at myself as an artist completely differently than what I had looked at myself before.
Yes, it's a great book, and it's makes you do a couple of things that will help you open yourself up to becoming an artist. And one is the journal, that you just have to sit down and write whatever you think of, write 10 pages every day, which is a much bigger challenge than it sounds like.
So do you do that?
I did it. I did the whole program, and I still keep a journal, especially when I travel. I like to keep the journal, and I can go back and I can read about the places I've been. But time constraints don't allow me to do as much writing as I'd like to do. But I've been threatening to write a book for years, so hopefully one day I'll get around to it.
Well, that would be awesome. So how, when you're getting ready to do your art, do you have any kind of a process that you do to connect to that inspiration and that divine flow or that creative zone, however you want to call it? Do you have something
Well,
that
after
you do?
this many years, it's almost automatic that you kind of learn how to get into that groove and start producing art. But it wasn't, always that way. In the beginning, you have to sort of force yourself into that mode. But now it's almost automatic. And what I do is I get up, I have a cup of coffee, I water the whole nursery first, which is sort of a meditative act in itself, and it gives you time to think and meditate about what you're going to do that day. And I find that music helps a lot. I love my iPod Nano, so I have about 10,000 songs on there now, and all different kind of music, and I think that really helps you get into the groove of working and getting going. So I meditate in the morning, and then I meditate while I'm watering, and then I am ready to create.
And so are you able to have time every day that you can actually work on your art?
Yeah, I would say 5 days out of 7 I have time to work on the art. Sometimes it's a half day, sometimes it's all day. But of course, I have customers to see. We have several garden centers that carry my work, so I have to see them, and we have the shows. And then it's a big job just gathering the material. So I travel the whole southeastern United States to visit nurseries and gather the type of material that I need to create the bonsai art.
And so do you have nurseries that kind of are on the lookout for you that can give you a heads up if they have something in particular that they think would be an effective material for you?
Yeah, sometimes they do call me, but mostly it's searching, and I've got to say that the GPS makes that so much easier than the old days when I was out nursery hunting in a new town. And I hope Ma Bell's not listening, but I used to tear the pages out of the phone book and then call them up and ask for directions. Now I can just type nursery into the GPS, and it'll tell me where all the nurseries are in the area. So it's made it a lot easier and a lot more fun to go search for material. So sometimes we're looking for material at people sort of like me that have a bonsai nursery, and some of them are wholesale and some of them are little mom and pop operations, where I can get material that's a little far along, but mostly they're big wholesale nurseries, and there's a limited amount of stuff there that we can use. So it takes a lot of searching to find good material.
Well, and I know in the bio we mentioned that you do a lot of teaching, that you like to teach and you do a lot of teaching. How does that work into your days and your weeks? Do you have a regular schedule of how you teach, or is it just more sporadic?
Well, teaching is a lot of fun. It is time consuming, and it's not really something I make money on. But I think teaching is important because you spread the word about bonsai among people that haven't been exposed to it before. You may get a lifelong customer by giving them a bonsai lesson. And so we teach in different ways. You can take an individual bonsai lesson as $45 to get started, and we'll teach you the basics. We break it down into steps so that you can learn step by step. That way you can take any piece of material, and once you know what the steps are, you can do it. And then we do demonstrations all over the Southeast to garden clubs and bonsai clubs all over the Southeast. And that's a lot of fun because it puts you in touch with your peers. These are all bonsai collectors and bonsai hobbyists. And it allows you to sort of hone your craft in terms of teaching and to see a wider audience and expose them to your ideas.
How has the art of bonsai affected your spiritual evolution, or how has your spiritual evolution affected your art?
I think bonsai has affected my spiritual evolution a lot just by its nature. It has a quiet spiritual nature of its own. For instance, in the Shinto religion, bonsai trees are still used in the ceremony. And bonsai, the triangle that the bonsai forms in Japanese spirituality is a connection between heaven, God, and man, the three corners of the triangle. And so if you think about that, it does affect your spiritual evolution because you're so much more in touch with the tune of the seasons, changes of the seasons, the rhythm of flowering trees, and so forth. And there's a stillness there that I think really puts you more in touch with the source.
Well, and I think I even find myself that, in the business world, you get into this process of really pushing and trying to make things happen. And when you look at the seasons of nature, there's no pushing. You have to you have to do the prep work and you have to do the, different steps, but you can't make it happen any faster.
No, you can't make it happen any faster. And we absolutely stretch the bounds of Mother Nature, what Mother Nature can do, because we can't always pot bonsai and do the root pruning at the optimum time of year. So it's a process of learning what you can get away with and what you can't. But the rules of nature, they sometimes can be bent, but they can't be broken.
And I think that's a good lesson for all of us. Kind of getting into the rhythm of the way life really works.
Yes, absolutely.
So I saw in your material that you sent me before the show that you were instrumental in getting the category of bonsai accepted into the Southeastern Flower Show. How important was that to the art of bonsai to have that be in such a big flower show? Well,
that's an interesting story. If you go to any of the major flower shows throughout the world, bonsai is a centerpiece of the show. For instance, the Chelsea Flower Show in England and the Philadelphia Flower Show, bonsai is a big deal and is a big drawing card to the event. And so when I spoke with the flower show committee, this back in 2000, I said, well, why don't you have bonsai in the flower show? And they said, well, we just don't have anybody to do it. And would you like to do it?
Oh, by the way.
And so I got them started, and it was an amazing experience because it also got the whole Atlanta bonsai community involved in the flower show. And we actually had some great displays over the years that I think people really enjoyed, and I loved doing it. And I had a great time with it. I got a little tired with the politics at the end, so I let some of the younger guys take that over now.
Well, it's always such a great show, and I remember seeing bonsai there several times that I've been, so I thank you for being instrumental in getting that into the show.
Yeah.
So what is there any last thing that you would like to tell our listeners about how they could connect their own process of their art into their expression of spirituality?
Well, let's see. I think if you take the time to visualize what you want to create and understand that God was a creator, and as a creator, since we were made in His image, we were intended to be creative beings. It's intrinsic and part of our nature. And if you look at yourself in that light, I know a lot of people don't, but all of us have that innate ability to become creative beings, and it's a great way to explore your inner self.
So tell our listeners again how they can find you and find your work.
Yeah, they can go to our website, www.bonsaimoon.com. They can also come to Japan Fest and see us, and the Candler Park Festival and the Piedmont Park Festival will be our first show, and that's August 18th and 19th. I think it's going to be great to be in that show because all Atlanta will be there. So
all of those shows are Atlanta-based shows. So for folks that live other places in the country, come to Atlanta.
Come to Atlanta.
Come to the shows.
Come to our nursery. Our nursery, again, is Full Moon Bonsai Nursery in Marietta, Georgia. It's not far off of I-75, so if you're ever going up and down and you'd like to see some great bonsai, come on by.
Mike, thank you so much. I appreciate you being part of our show today.
Thanks, Vanessa. Thanks for having me.
Sure. And thank you to our listeners. I welcome your suggestions or comments on this or any of our shows. You can find links to all of our shows on Empower Radio and on our website, artasworship.net. Please come share your stories of art as worship on our Facebook page, which is facebook.com/artisworship, or suggest an artist that we should interview. Listen in next week as we talk with another artist about their creative process and how it connects with their spiritual journey. May you have an inspired and creative week. Namaste.